Dear President Trump, Fox News, and Americans. Dear President Trump, Fox News, and Americans. On a mass scale, due process rackets where they said they're pretending they're legitimately serving due process, but they are not, as collusion slash S, and as them having been as cover-ups, and while being shown needs to hide, roles with that self-value and needing to come, while they're being shown needs to hide it for what nature is demonstrating about that they can't afford to discern where there are formal law voices who have and have had timed collusion slash S with overt criminal enterprises and private ones and terrorists since before our founders were born, with differences. The differences we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. We have nature itself communicating to us about difference. See, but we have identity theft, fraud, slanders, people stacking predicate acts with facts and databases, collusion slash ESLA, with what is hyper foreign at countries A through Z. But this already had groupings of families and things off the records manifest that the breaching method uses. People from Mexico, people from Canada that have long since before I was born been involved with Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut. Their roles with UConn, with drugs and medicines crimes, with the only bodies allowed to counter such things, because their roles with all kinds of natures of evidences, racketeering, worse than war crimes. Increasingly collusion slash S, no, at all natures of crime scenes and next to them. Only capable of changing and faking, hiding details and significance of relativity to subjects individually grouped and together. In other words, all the experts are reliant upon other types of experts, law experts with readings of Marbury versus Madison. I'm not even a lawyer. Many ways, thank God. But in other words, myself and other people would have gotten into the law, would have gotten into different industries. But the gateway to each industry, the same way the departments at the campuses, not just Central Connecticut State University. There's a Detective Samuda involved with a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Detective Samuda's black theme, where they have black, white, female judges involved with some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme. There are some Mendez police involved with attaching me to a fake conversation with them, ever, the older Mendez police brother. And at the Withersfield police station when I was an adult, as their roles with Saudi attackers and the cliques with the many nations, involved with the name Scalora. Foreign and domestic military used remotely criminally foreign influence. Roles with names Demoro and Colo, with one's name Maiano and Io too, with the spots next to Harvard Hospital, with child abusers, leaders of the kids first forced years apart, who had more roles with other natures of predicate acts and no organized crimes. First forced on kids has roles with names that were at the elderly homes too. Clearer than day, recorded how kept criminally foreign influence tactical delusions wrought by that which effectively pulled off the World Trade Center attack. As roles with the communications locations next to were WFSB, and next to Fox Connecticut News, and next to WTNH. A bunch of people tied to former mayors from Wethersfield and their family members. Like, in other words, they apparently took a picture of me. I had no verbal communications with them. In a park, Danielle Perron was influenced to make it look like she was. I know them. With a Mark Violet, and with a Kevin Caron and a Mark Caron, and with a Justin Klavinskis. who I also don't know, but in other words, they said before that they all had sexual relations with her. And in other words, and they had the rules with my neighbors, but they wasn't there then. That was a fake exception. There are other people I don't even know their names. One of the girls lied to my science class teachers. I had rules with it. Forced, tricked her, and persuaded. My FBI director, Robert Luskin, former FBI directors, like James Comey too. These are people at and next to congressional building in Hartford, and the spots next to it, like people tied to a Mayano, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids with foreign and domestic military and medical with that, and people with Wethersfield police involved with the name DeMorrow and Colo, names DeMorrow, Colo, and Kerr. With the police, they attached me to fake conversations with the police as a kid too, and then they pretended that through the news when I was an adult. They're putting fake things in databases. They make arrests and they put multiple falsified police reports and confessions tied to that, switching the narratives regarding who was the arresting officer with ones that weren't even there. And then no one, God knows what they're putting in the databases. They're just using all natures of defenses of titles and differences as also recorded and collusions with retired Wethersfield police chiefs and lawyers associated with them, like one named Baird, involved with a retired police chief Cintron. No, and a family from Puerto Rico that is not the police chief's family, and his intimate ties involved with the people from Puerto Rico with the name Cintron. No. Involved with all kinds of federal evidences crimes with Sandy Hook campuses and intelligence, also with the police chief Cintron, and with the ones and other situations. They have all kinds of ways they switch names, forge names, relative to how people ask questions, go back and forth, and use words like control. New Britain Superior Court recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they use the word control as their collusion /S with all these different countries and families at other campuses and next to them. Mark Violet, Justin Klavinskis, and a Chris Walters, and a Fred Guzet sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm they have roles in federal crimes with intelligence families, a whole bunch. Oliveri, too. People I never tried to contact sought me out and then I didn't even know they were connected to my neighbors. Because then in descriptions of it in the future, they're lying about what's actually recorded. And as collusion /S, increasingly with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and U/S, of also roles with overt, first forced child abusers, leaders of kids, with other natures of organized crimes involved too at the same time. And with the names supposed to counter it, and the differences of the guilt. They're only capable of using crime methods like pretending they don't realize that everyone could be and was guilty together, relative to the readings of statutes like with the Bayard, where it gives the benefit of the doubt at the last second to people regarding on their what job they have, what title. In other words, that's why relative to the rules, saying and doing whatever at locations and online, to bring things before courts. There are also rules of predicate acts methods where they've been changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded to do that, to use those locations to hide how they're being and haven't been used remotely. There is a woman who appeared to be Italian non-verbally involved with New Britain Superior Court. I don't know what she wrote in the database. She got people tied to my neighbors that had roles with home break-ins with people from other areas who have roles with the Wethersfield police, wire crimes, falsified police report, refusing to identify themselves legitimately, and people with violence involved from other areas who are also involved with their doctors and all sides of criminal, even if they're undercover police forms. There are people involved with the parks and recreation through administrations showing fake information. They've been hiding in WFSB faked conversations with me and about the World Trade Center attack, which simultaneously recorded their collusions with people named Scalora interstates before long, and other people named DeMoro and Kirk, and they're educators. These are people I didn't even have classes with, and they made a Neville family made fake exceptions with them. The whole bunch of people. One of the things that connects them is they make fake exceptions, and they have roles with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and news at the same time, and the court's names, forging and switching names and sequences, sticking fake things in databases. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and other retired police chiefs and departments with the same houses personally and professionally are involved with a whole bunch of people at the Britain Superior Court and involved with a whole bunch of federal evidences, crimes, and rackets with investigators use remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, involved with the Jonathan Maiano and boyfriends of a Spada family, involved with my neighbors and judges and their family members too. Like, in other words, please Spada, get John Maiano on paper with the Wethersfield Police Chief Cintron and the Mazzucato family off the identity theft frauds of me. The WFSB is also involved with this. In other words, in tomorrow's market, there's a Paul DeMoro who will court express, demonstrate, confirm. Only conversation I ever had with him. He has rules of wire crime acts and methods with the police forms, which John DeMoro and Joe DeMoro will court express, demonstrate, confirmed. Also with Don LeConche is involved with them with identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences, crimes, and roles with Heather Hansen, educators of hers, and abuses of her, and helping her. And the difference of that is too, because there are roles with judges, family members next to the campuses. There are girls at Trinity College. There's a girl at Trinity College that said to me that years before that, I don't know, and then she hit, they forced her not to hide what I communicated increasingly, and then to make things up and pretend she knows me. I don't even know her. She's increasingly been planting. These are people that have been planting evidences with a former mayor Gold and his family members at and next to parks, intercities, mayors next to the parks near Ilo's kitchen, where it was. I don't know if I think it's still there, which is not far from the campus of Hartford Hospital. There are foreign and domestic medical families involved with sexual. I only saw a Joe Ilo on the campus of on a Wethersfield campus one time in my life. It was after he graduated, which is involved with their needs to sequence shift. He also has roles with intelligence all along the Borough Turnpike since I was a kid. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Planting evidences roles with these names like Joe Ilo and John Maiano with intelligence families near me, use remotely criminally foreign influence, using and having used all natures of investigation, roles with it. See, forgiveness is to not to leave out the breaching method with guilt. And this is also showing that into all sides of criminal and civil cases, news at the same time, and the courts at the same time, are collusions also these same names that from other areas on my street planting evidences with the ones involved with the police confessions, pretending it's not a confession too. They brought up the name Colol without leaving the full name. And they brought it up on Ray Colol make confessions and demonstrations on social media. Out of character too. Because they've been sometimes it's their family criminally foreign influence, sometimes just their roles with the intelligence that have been roles with them, using investigative remotely, using crime methods where they record different things themselves saying opposite things in the meaning of it. And, both things are criminally foreign influence. But they're pretending other, because these are people that just get things to go before courts because the courts themselves had differentially some ways they were worse involved with various natures of crime scenes, and with the prisons where they've been collusion /S at those crime scenes, and with names next to them. And now they have the like a serial killer. That guy and the people of his prison had collusion /S with other natures of organized crimes involved with the names next to the spot where the Syrian killer was. They're also involved increasingly with people from my grammar school that I don't even know, with the ones from other areas that pretended other with my on my street by seeking me out too at first as a stranger. Then I know that they're trying to make it look like, oh, this is the peers and things like that. Even the real motivations are fake, are used fake. So in other words, when they're having you defend against, like, in other words, how they're controlling the questions about how and why you would deport someone who's not even from our country. And oh, this is the detail left out, but they're faking the details of all of this. Overt criminal enterprises and private ones, not legitimately with the military, with a whole bunch of people tied to the name Scalora, next to campuses, also involved with identity theft from frauds with them. Then they put then they want to put a restraining order to put fake things in databases and to force child abusers leaders of kids. Whiting Forensics did that to force a proven principal child abuser involved with way worse digital crimes with kids than he was put in jail for. And I believe at Sandy Hook prisons, no, which have roles with people with the name O'Brien and Cololo. There's a Phil Cololo also with Whiting Forensics through time since I was a kid, involved with other child abusers, leaders of kids, and that they have roles with that. And they're making confessions from other areas, the intelligence and interbranch regarding my neighbors, which are recorded involved with them attaching me to fake conversations with the police and with their roles with the names at next to the news locations, foreign and domestic, military, criminally foreign and domestic intelligence. They have doctors forging other doctors' names and putting whole fake transcripts and other. That's part of the things they do to use investigators, remotely criminally foreign influence, to keep people using words like crimes, who are roles of predicate acts with facts methods. I asked many times to have the fake conversations with me that WFSB pretended to be addressed. There were collusion with people all from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield. They're still communicating about that than our founders communicated about it. George Washington had to come to Wethersfield, Connecticut, to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, and next to a witch trials place, had to come here to counter-extort right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, using James Madison's plan, using the founders behind him. Otherwise, there was no way to counter the internationally monitored conversations, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, and roles of all natures of difference, not just black and white. As systems tactical ulterior from the human species body of individual bodies, all group differences. Appreciated now tactical ulterior from how nature shows us to. And syntactically. Only capable of valuing criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, rot readings of statutes, precedents, of principles. This is principle having black people's whites of eyes projected to us by the identity that we know none could mimic. I mean, none could fake. We know that, in other words, is the one that is true always, and as truth not being used for lies, not being used to screen lies, not being used to screen motivations. This breaching method new at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states A through Z. Its breaching method would be a scientific value that nature itself would continually demonstrate to us. A human fact true nature breaching method is one of the things, all those laws that were entrenched before America's founders were born, that they were collusions as, they were value as. They were of a value as a human fact treatment nature breaching method. That's true always. Counters to it needed to say things and need to say things like that, and like how and why it's not true always about racism. A breaching method stuck that in there. And our founders counter breaching method. Our founders counter method is our founders plural, but we were directed. I read that we were directed to refer to our founders plural as James Madison singular. And then they went and got George Washington to agree to use that plan and to help them. And then they went and counter extorted at key locations and made people break the crazy syntax laws where no one had free speech. Everyone had to pretend other to an extent. Otherwise, that body was censored, including if that body was a majority of people, including if that body was everybody. Even though a whole state, even though a whole county, a whole state, or a whole country. Even any grouping of countries to counter all the things that in demonstration of this still that it causes negative value nature, progression, acts nature, more and more self-value. The only means to counter such to self-value criminal and citizen's natures of positive treatment and self-value syntactically. And the self-value part is to show that there's a remote uses of that. Each identity of sophistication, including the differences of the parties, of the political parties, as they are entertained in the nature of debate regarding free speech and people's motivations for it. That is used to make fake examples. In other words, these industries that need us to understand how they are victims / hyper victims. Nature wants and needs us to understand this, but nature's system is not being allowed to us to appreciate that. And if we try to appreciate that way, they're going to fake and change our words anyway because they can't help it. Because when everyone was a little kid, nature itself showed the identities of the sciences, the identities of the law, obligations to show that and how there was a predicate acts with facts, a criminal and citizen's delivery system method that had been sustained upon humanity A through Z. And then religious messengers were born already from off the campuses A through Z, the equivalents with exceptions, which they used to work together for first to be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. There are proofs. And they're also by and as nature itself, its actual identity relation to itself, which doesn't leave out how we have black people's whites of eyes from the subject of slavery. But this breaching method knew that we were going to be, it measures and maintains that countries individually grouped and together. Any grouping of countries that tries to counter what this caused and keeps syntactically, that while they're entertaining the Boolean logic, the nature of logic, the postures of proper aggression treatments, the postures of peace treatments, proper, that are not proper. The mass behavior racketeering worse than war crimes method is shared through the nations involved with the world wars and with the revolution. We are not allowed to speak honestly about the extortion of George Washington because it would have brought up how James Madison's plan, how he was using it, what really caused the Declaration of Independence, what really caused the Constitutional Convention. It would have brought up therefore be Boolean logic with all kinds of takes and natures of jobs and titles and experts with convictions by history's principles. Exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. Exactly as state styles needs natures of logic that could only get away with that by self-valuing. Predicate acts with facts already having been stacked into databases for them. Already having been collusion /s with acting at other locations to make fake exceptions. With people also collusions with the breaching methods use of having people on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, the family members, sources, neighbors, the news at the same time, the same thing, names them to them, different natures of conjunction to them. And the courts themselves, the police forms, names on off the judicial branch office, on off the state corrections offices, increasingly involved with all kinds of methods and natures of organized crimes. I'm not a police form. Boxings, in other words. There are proofs, recorded, capacity demonstrated, confirmed that the intelligence has been planting evidences, lies about me, and using truths for lies. Make fake what they think about people. Like with boxing gyms, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has roles with courts too, grouped with predicate acts, with people tied to foreign and domestic military before and after the World Trade Center attack, involved with New Park Avenue, lying about me behind my back to people at gyms where they use the right to lie, where they don't have the right to lie. As people involved with Harper Courts and New Britain Superior Court with the FBI, and people on up the Wethersfield Police Department involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with a whole bunch of different countries, including the Saudi attackers used remotely themselves. There are proofs, and Bin Laden's reported roles. And regardless if they made that up, in other words, we could also the readings of of statutes and precedents and of the religious books. They're clearer than day. Read criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought and out of sequence, and as styles, needs, and natures valuing sequence shifts, just like WFSB put sequence shifts, and needs to hide how those World Trade Center predicate acts after the attack. Where are their collusions with names since long term before it, and then short term before it, the same names involved with them, with such insidious predicate acts against people they don't even know. All exception. Oh, I saw what you posted on Facebook there. The police also made fake accounts of pretending to be me, and people tied to me, and they changed what was typed on there, including the court, the Britain Superior Court. And people, I don't know the Casper family. Increasingly, Chet Casper and his educators involved with people with the state judicial branch offices and with the World Trade Center and with Washington, D.C., involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, also with a Debbie Gold and her father, involved with various natures of organized crimes against elderly, against little kids, against veterans, while being pretending passions and emotions about their religions and other people's. They're putting fake transcripts in databases. All kinds of mayors involved with all kinds of natures of medicines corruption and drugs crimes, with people only allowed to counter that on the corrections offices and judicial branch offices and Harvard Hospital, with the businesses and houses next to them, like DeMoro, Aiello, and Miano, involved with my neighbors with untimely deaths, my past neighbors, and the ones ongoing with the child abusers, leaders of the kids at the same time brought up. They influenced a Dean Judd, a Dean Judd from Central Connecticut State University, and a Dean Alford from Trinity College, to roles with people with murder confessions and untimely deaths on and off the campus that were connected, and they were timed, and with the confessions that were manifest because of where and how there were criminal foreign influences cover-ups from old things where people intercities they are shown they need to hide live progressions by pretending that they treated evidences legitimately, pretending they didn't realize they had roles with all these ways recorded originally and still, all natures of investigations, investigators, instances, descriptions, names, descriptions, mass self-valued sequence shifts, tactically delusions wrought, criminally foreign influence, packaging, nature, quality, aspects of nature. In other words, it's recorded. The bar is sick just from their roles with like a Trantola, And I'll tell you, they make people yell at others because they communicate that they plant evidences and force things before courts or police or people to shut up and let you, you know people communicate other than they're pretending. While with other whole bunch of different countries, work criminal enterprises and private ones that are involved, and there's violence involved. There's credible violent threats on me. I need to deal with this fact treatment nature wise. That they're forging and switching names, refusing to get on paper, interbranch since I was a kid while they're stacking fake things. So you speak about homeland. In other words, so I had to say whatever to force my mother one time to call the police without telling her why. First, I tried to do it without calling police because people were trying to frame me, though. And then I found out they attached me to fake conversations with the police as a kid and then as an adult. Increasingly, the Colonial family has roles with retired police chiefs' intimate ties and their family members. With the 80 Churchill Drive with the people that lived there before that too, and where they moved from, people names over there, and people involved with probate court, multiple probate court, more than 3 probate court judges involved with the Colonial house and the O'Brien house, with Madison's crimes against little kids and against women, and including sexually with women judges' roles, which no one would want, but that makes exceptions for them because it keeps little knaves pretending they have their difference worse than what it is not. Pretend they could uphold, due process legitimately. Any subject treatment, let alone those most sacred. They could speak on crimes. They were involved with predicate acts with facts. And screening the breaching method. There are proofs that countries A through Z. It forced, tricked, and persuaded them, and knew that nature was going to demonstrate to us all at countries A through Z. We have to counter hyper-criminally foreign influence. And it knew it keeps us only capable of blaming criminal foreign influences until that's real more and more. And been defended as defenses of exactly what the breaching method needs to keep the hyper-criminally foreign influence not. It's observable how different countries had roles sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, northern colonies, southern colonies, northern states, southern states, and then the Civil War. And the Civil War, right through the Civil War, all there is communicated about that, about James Madison's plan, forced that in every other war. And to us to win revolution, to get the wars done, to get the need for it, to be able to defend ourselves as fact treatment nature. That's what Trump's longing to do with trade tariffs, because that's how we get fact treatment nature. Otherwise, we go deeper and deeper in suits and ties, counters and exceptions as collusions. They speak on crimes anyway. Exactly the way the breaching of the hyperforeign knew they wouldn't do. A through Z, systems tactical terror from how nature communicates with the human species body of individual bodies. How nature's body is discernible, how it is generating all differences. Oh, but we can't appreciate that with our short words, let alone the protraction, because we have been systems other that we have to appreciate simultaneously. It's impossible. Nature will continually demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts of nature. The campuses had sick roles with even worse from off them. And their differences are used because this needs to hide behind things and other names, this which has clearer than day, the suits and ties counters, except people spoke on crimes that countries A through Z. Roles of predicate acts with facts, methods. Exactly with it as sense and sensibilities, but sensing for the breaching method, the hyperforeign. I haven't even read Jane Austen yet. I didn't realize that and how. All this about how the people that were putting fake things in the databases at the campuses I went and next to them was his existence. These are also people pretending I'm bringing up their names dishonestly as victims, like someone capable of it. They have their kids' roles with sexual and medical offenders of kids, overt criminal enterprise, bribe one. It goes on, and they're jumping between the campuses. They're stacking more predicate acts with facts, wrongdoing, and subtly, not even realizing where and how it's tied to their treatments of the subjects, of principles, like with history, not legitimately, not sanely. Had one person treated witch trials sanely, they would have realized why and how the witch trials place is next to Webb House, renamed the Webb Stevens House. They would have realized George Washington had to counter extort there, but he was using James Madison's plan though. So how he had to describe it was distinct. But they all had to hide their roles with that. None of them had free speech. Everyone had to pretend they had other to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sentenced, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was everyone, including any grouping of countries, while still as locations, areas, and states self-valued roles you being and having to be used remotely. All those formal ways and locations, because no one discerned timed juxtaposition with a use /s of all locations /s everywhere the species body is that nobody wanted and wants, except for where and how. It only allowed everyone capable of blaming other things, others, or self for things that it caused and keeps. And when defending fact treatment nature, subject treatments as only heard, or relative to where and how they sense themselves or others, clearer than day, like with the narratives regarding the due process of a person that's not even from the country, went on a mass scale. There are all kinds of due processes, rackets, like magic tricks in the form of, evidence about cover-ups to collusions with the people involved with speaking about and distributing due process. The courts and the police forms and their source and the interbranch family members at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones originally and still. This is what witch trials are about. Even if they're made up, they're about those laws where there was slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, by the same breaching method that had been sustained since semi-ancient times on differences A through Z, on Native Americans A through Z, before they were Native Americans. And then Columbus came sailed the ocean blue. And nothing in the databases about anybody is true. And then our founders were born. Already this had been sustained against Native Americans sickly distinctly. Already had been simultaneously with the colonists, sustained on them and the Native Americans. And everyone was blaming other things, others themselves. Even when correctly more and more, it was wrong because it was other involved with it too. Specifically to keep the syntax for the sciences, for nature itself, self-valued by others besides itself, like as it needs that in nature it could show, needing to keep other things, others, or selves blamed for collusions with itself, which is its collusion to leave out how we have black pupils, whites alive, from subjects like slavery, and to leave that out from subjects like witch trials, and to leave out the breaching method first against Native Americans, because they are also plurally, and they are also part of that plural part of our founders that we're directed to refer to also as James Madison. That's also where they are coupled with our founders, agreed to help. And then there's that third portion of our founders, beginning with George Washington and the rest of the founders have had to be forced to help. They had to counter extort using James Madison's plan. And nobody had free speech, and to great extents. And everybody had to pretend other to an extent / extents. Otherwise, they would have been sentenced for already having been entrenched. Sense and sensibilities controlled by, by a breaching method that only was allowed at all locations. It was against the law. I learned at Central Connecticut State University to even have been heard. I mean, to have been found convicted or found out to have been you heard someone speaking about building outside of internationally monitored conversation. They would hurt that person and everyone around them. And worse, for example, there was factory nature, so therefore physical slavery of every single individual, of every group difference, every simultaneous difference. And the guilt assignments, even when correct, is used to maintain styles, needs, and natures, where they would respond to that and then defends those responses exactly the way the breaching method needs to screen itself left out. There's also why it's bad to even the worst criminals to kill them, because then you really can't study what happened. In other words, because some of the worst criminals have predicate acts methods and collusions have been stayed through the people involved with the corrections officers, judicial officers, and recorded consciously. This breaching method maintains names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, news, and the formal names of the interbranch locations. And all tied to them, and people need to hide the same sequence shifts, federal evidence is crimes. Like in other words, putting fake ties and natures of ties to people. That's also with people at the corners. I don't know where the Peron family lives. I don't know what, there's corners of streets involved with them, and the corner of Softstein Highway and Town Line Drive has a Peron family. It has a Kerr family. Has people with the name DeMorrow. Intercities involved with judges and prosecutors, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, people on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the state corrections offices, also timed collusions, roles with wire crimes and police involved with home break-ins, and sexual circles where the different boys tell different lies to their shared girlfriend, and they bring that into the intelligence family. And they hurt all those kids individually grouped it together. Specifically, right where the counters to it are saying nothing to it. And the difference of that is exploited by the people involved with the predicate acts with facts methods involved. These are people that have been using and have been shown by the breaching method having been used them to use all natures of investigations. Investigators remotely criminally foreign influence tactically delusions raw. So there's something to do with the in other words, all natures of readings of the difference between federal and states' rights. When they use rights, we have rights that are too numerous to have to list. That's what Judge Napolitano says part of the Constitution. But we're supposed to get the Constitution on a bridge. That's the most important thing. But the breaching method knew that at countries A through Z, that would be an important thing to them too, but that no one could do it without discerning the hyper-foreign. It's discernible. It was distinctly, but also non-distinctly, northern colonies and southern colonies, themselves distinct possessions of identities that didn't have possessions of themselves. Again, specifically to keep other things others themselves. Blame for what nature is demonstrating. Not just the human factory nature breaching method. Again, that is one of the things that nature shows us. that those laws were true always, value as. Not racism, designed specifically to have it called racism or to have that body sensed for the breaching method, for the hyper-foreign. There were criminal foreign influences involved with that too. But there were also hyper-criminal foreign influences. That's the kind of care and with particularity we're supposed to counter. And and take seriousness. See, people who make fake seriousness, like with leaving out black people's white lives, pretending integrity by readings of American history, by the nature of debate, A, therefore B. All that is styles that are preventing the principle, James Madison's plan to counter the other third of our founders. There are the founders grouped that agreed, Native Americans and James Madison and the other colonists behind him and his plan. And then again, they went to George Washington. He got him to agree. This is before James Madison was even a president. And then James Madison, when he was a president, he didn't have free speech. So in other words, no one could explain any of the presidents properly without understanding that and how everyone was used remotely at all locations, areas, of the state. Thank you.